Welcome back, folks, to another edition of the Late Night Review. Tonight, I want to review one of my favorite horror movies of all time, Friday the 13th, Part 3. Now, I have a lot of nostalgia for this one. Came out when I was a kid, and the first time I saw it was with my cousin at my uncle's place, and he was gone. My cousin was waiting for it to come on. It came on, and we watched it. Since then, I rewatched it over and over and over again. I saw it on some of the pay channels, and then later on, as I got older, they rented it for me. Not too much older, you know, still young, but I saw that movie over and over again. This movie is the reason I didn't cover or talk about part 1 and 2, the reason I haven't made late night reviews about 1 and 2 is because part 3 is my favorite Friday the 13th movie. It's my favorite in the franchise, but just by a little, because when I was a kid, part 6 was my favorite. When that came out, it was my favorite movie, actually, and I watched it, really liked it, and enjoyed it, and it was my favorite for a long time. And then I kept going back to 3 and 4, so 3, 4, and 6 are always fighting for my top spot when it comes to the Friday the 13th franchise. Some days I might like part 6 again better. Some days it might be part 4. But if I had to choose, it's part 3. And there's a few reasons why. I mean, they're all pretty close. Yes, it's kind of slow in the middle. It does kind of drag on in the middle. But Richard Brooker is my favorite Jason, and I think that there's many actors who did a good job. In the remake, Derek Mears, I thought, did a good job. Ted White in part 4 has always been one of my favorites. Kane Hodder, of course. C.J. Graham in part 6 really filled out Jason really big. I really like that look for Jason as well. I think part 3 has the scariest looking Jason. Part 4, yes, you can make a case. I think that the Jason in part 4 and the remake were both really scary. Part 3 and 4, I think, are the closest. Those are the two scariest Jasons, even though I liked how he looked in the other films as well. He had a cool look, really cool look in part 7. But part 3, I think he was the scariest looking. And this is the first time in the series that we got the big Jason, the Jason who was strong, extra strong, like superhuman strength, big neck, muscular. And Richard Brooker sure brought the character to life. Richard Brooker, I mean, is a well rounded person, not just an actor. He's done other things in his life, and it's sad that he didn't have a chance to make more and be Jason and don the mask again and make more Friday the 13th before his passing. He was my favorite Jason. And there's others who did a good job too, but I think that he brought such charisma to the character. And I think his build was just right for Jason. Big, but also flexible, athletic. He worked in the circus, he used to catch people. He was very strong. And he really had the right look, the right height. And I believe that he would have reprised the role if I wish they would have asked him. I wish they would have asked Richard Brooker to reprise the role. It would have been awesome to see him in more. In fact, during an interview once, he did say if he was asked to reprise the role, if he would do it, and he said yes, because it was a lot of fun, and he did such a good job. And also, I think that this movie has one of the best openings. And I like the music. I really do like the music. It's funny. I know it's disco, kind of horror disco slash horror. It's funny. I like the music in here, the theme song. But I also love the real serious music in here. There's music in here I think that it probably fits Friday the 13th and the franchise better than almost any score, along with obviously part 4, part 2, and there's many others that have great scores, really good, well matching music for what the movie is. And I think this is really one of the best. I like the way the music is utilized in different scenes. It makes it scarier, more creepy. Besides the theme song, which is funny and cool, I think it's pretty cool. But the music, how it matches the scenes. And then also Steve Miner, he's very talented. I mean, he's not only directed Friday the 13th Part 3 and 2 and H2O and Warlock, but he's directed other movies too that aren't horror. Some comedies, some dramas. Forever Young with Mel Gibson. He directed Soul Man, I believe, with C. Thomas Howell, a picture that came out in 1986. So he's very well rounded. He's got a very big range in terms of making films and making them not only very well, but making them look good and capturing the atmosphere that he's going for the particular time and particular genre that he happens to be in. Very well rounded. And the cast in here, I think, is pretty good. I think they all do a good job. I like everybody in here. Shelley, I know a lot of people criticize that character. They hate him or they don't like him, but I actually get a kick out of him. He actually entertained me and amused me, even though he went way too far with his jokes. And what he did was just ridiculous. And if you knew him, you'd be so upset and angry with him. But I think a character like that in a Friday the 13th movie fits right in. I think it sets up stuff to happen, and I think it's a good match for the film. And all the actors and actresses in here did what's expected of them. I think they played the parts well, and in that part two had a great cast too. I really like John Fury, Amy Steele. I thought everybody in there was really good, and then part four is one of the better casts. The thing about part three in its cast, along with a couple other films that I like, there's no one in here that irritated me where I didn't want to watch it. There's certain characters in some other movies in the franchise where, yes, if they're irritating, that means you want Jason to get them, and yes, that's a good payoff at the end. But how many minutes do you have to go through it? How many minutes of suffering do you have to go through before they actually get it? So in this movie, there's nothing to irritate me really. And the thugs, the bikers who bullied Shelley in town and Vera, they got what was coming to them relatively quickly, so you didn't have to wait too long for that. You didn't have to suffer through the whole picture and then just be frustrated. So anyway, the cast in here didn't irritate me. I was comfortable with the cast. The beginning, I thought it was really well done. In the remake, the opening scenes in the remake, the new Friday the 13th, it's not so new now. It came out a number of years ago, but that was really great. I mean, if you like action, if you like a fast pace, and you like something really put together well, I think the beginning of the remake is arguably one of the best, if not the best, opening of any Friday the 13th. But I actually think part three has a really good opening too. And I actually think it's a little scarier, even though the remake was more disturbing and it was a little more fast, definitely more faster paced at the beginning. I actually like the thunder and the lightning, the scene, and then it recaps part two. It shows John Fury, Paul, and then Jenny, played by Amy Steele at the beginning. It shows they're defeating Jason before he or after he terrorizes them for a little bit. And so it recaps part two and then it goes into part three and it has the opening with the music, which is fun. But then it goes to that couple at nighttime. They're living out there in the forest and they're running a kind of a store. And you see the lightning, the thunder, the sheets are blowing in the wind, and you get glimpses of Jason with his bald head and his kind of stocky look moving between the sheets, and the way the music is, and the shadows and everything. And then you see the news report on TV, and the woman watching the news and seeing this story about these people were brutally attacked and killed, and there's only one survivor, like one or two survivors. Uh, Definitely one, at least one, Amy Steele, Jenny. And then she's seeing the news report, watching it, and then she hears something outside. So the killer's on the loose. He hasn't been apprehended. The killer hasn't been apprehended. So it kind of sets up the beginning. And I think it's actually scarier than a lot of other openings for a lot of other, not only Friday the 13th movies, but just horror in general. And the way it's shot, the way Steve Miner utilizes everything in there to his advantage, sets it up. And I think it's actually scary with the sheets blowing in the wind and all that. And then in the middle, yes, it is slow. It is slow. And I wish it wasn't. I wish there was a couple more scenes, carnage scenes in there where Jason jumps out and gets someone in the middle. Would have been improved this movie. But I like this scenery. I love the fact that it's in the forest again. One of the things I've always liked about Friday the 13th movies is that it's in nature. It's in the forest, and Jason is like a monster coming, and he's on the prowl, and he's watching, and something about that's fascinating and interesting. But I've always liked nature. I've always liked the forest. So that's another thing that draws me to the Friday the 13th movies. And when I was a kid, when you're a kid, you want to see the latest shocking thing. But as I've gotten older, I don't really go for blood and guts anymore. I go more for the story. And I like when good wins in the end, and most of the older movies has that aspect where good wins in the end. In The Final Girl, most of you've seen it, so I guess it's not really a spoiler, but The Final Girl, played by Dana Kimmel. I thought she was a really good final girl, actually, and she fought back, too. I mean, she hit Jason with a piece of lumber over the back of the head, hit him with a shovel, hung him, put an axe in his head, so she more than held her own. And she's a good actress. I've seen her in other films. She was in Lone Wolf McQuade, one of my favorite action movies as a kid and still now, with Chuck Norris. She was in there. She played his daughter. I've seen her in various other roles, and I think she does a good job. One of the best final girls, I think, in horror, to her credit. And I like the chase scenes. In fact, I had a reoccurring nightmare as a kid where I'm always running through this house trying to get up to the top and get out on the roof before Jason gets me. That's another 3 and 4 kind of probably provoke that reoccurring nightmare to happen to me, where I'd be in this house. It was raining outside. And so the house kind of reminds me a little bit more of part 4, but 3 and 4 both kind of provoke that because they both have scenes about that. But anyway, I would run upstairs trying to get away from Jason. He was running after me, because Jason running is always scarier, I think, than Jason just walking. He's running after me. As a kid, I had this dream, and I would try to get up on the roof, and he's almost grabbed me as I went through the window, and it was just a reoccurring dream. Probably shouldn't have watched that at that age, but that was a nightmare. But it was provoked by those movies. But anyway, yeah, Jason in this movie I think is really, really scary. I like the way it's set up. And as far as the dream sequence goes, I always like the dream sequence because it sets up the scene later. I always thought that, I never bought the thing about Jason was trying to assault her sexually or anything like that, because it's not his MO. He's just a killer. In all the movies, there's never even been a hint of that. So I think the people's minds are going in a little different direction. I think it's common nowadays to do that and make that kind of inference. I don't make that kind of inference. The way I took it is that she ran away from her parents. They had the fight. She went out to the forest. Jason attacked her, and he probably saw her. He dragged her, and he probably saw her parents' car headlights, and maybe he ran off. That's the way I always took it. Maybe I'm kind of reading a little bit too much into that myself and filling in the gaps too much, but never thought of anything else because it's not Jason's MO. Didn't think of anything really um, off kilter or sick or anything like that, because that's not what he does. He's just a killer, this big psycho killer. But I thought the dream sequence was well done, and then at the end, when he unmasks himself, the revealing, he takes the mask off, it set that scene up. And I think the look of Jason in here, the way the makeup was, and of course Richard Brooker bringing it to life with his expressions, but the makeup and the way he looked it's more scary than any Friday the 13th movie, along with part 4. And the remake also, although I didn't like his clothes in the remake. And I got a lot of complaints about the remake, even though I thought the opening was great. I thought that the hockey mask looked too much like his skin color. I like more of a white mask or maybe a variation of colors, but his mask almost seemed to be a part of his face in the remake, and I didn't like that. I'm old school. I like that traditional look to the hockey mask, even though it was similar. The color of his mask in the remake looked too much like his skin tone, so it was almost like it was the same thing. And I liked how his face looked though, and I liked how they had a little hair hanging, but I didn't like the clothes as much as, it kind of made more sense. But I really have nostalgia for Jason's older look. And I thought that the way, I mean, look at the scenes in there where he's hissing from the window, and he's got that blood coming down because he got hit with the axe, even though she lost her mind. And this is pretty much all in her head because now she has PTSD and she's all messed up, and she'll never be the same. So even though she basically won in the end, she'll be messed up for life. So she's victimized again, and that's very disturbing. But it just shows what she went through. All her friends were killed, but the way Jason looked, and when he took his mask off and he kind of smiled, and I think the way he looked in here just added so much. In fact, one of my it's not really a criticism, but one thing I wish they would have done is had him do a little bit more of what he normally does, a few more kills without the mask, or at least one or two scenes without it. He didn't have it within the dream sequence, so that kind of helped. But I thought his face was really scary in there, and in part 4 as well. But look at those pictures in part 3, and it's really something else. But yeah, this is my favorite Friday the 13th movie, along with 4 and 6. It seems like 3, 4, and 6 are always fighting for the top spot, and there's others in the franchise that I like too quite a bit, including part 2 is one of my favorites. I really like it how it was done, also directed by Steve Miner. And so yeah, this is a movie. If you haven't, most people have seen it. If you haven't, you like horror movies. If you like horror movies, you're going to be in for a really really good treat. It's fun. It's interesting. A little slow in the middle, but some good chase scenes at the end. And I don't have another thing I don't want to forget to mention. I don't have a problem that so many scenes were filmed in the barn. When I was younger, I used to work in a barn and outside too. Did some I stacked some wood, and then I baled some hay in the barn when I was a kid. Not too young, but kind of late teenager, early adult, and helped my uncle. Those were some really good times, and worked in a barn. So the barn that they used reminded me of the barn I used to work in a little bit. So I didn't have a problem with that at all. I think it's creepy. I think it's dark, and it's got shadows of its own where he can hide. So it didn't bother me at all. In fact, I kind of liked it. It kind of brought me back to those days. But yeah, and this is the first time Jason, the character, gets the mask, that iconic hockey mask. That's another thing I didn't want to forget. I'm trying to go through my mind and make sure before the video is over that I don't forget. I usually, when I film these videos, I usually don't cut a lot. I usually just go straight through memory. So I'm just trying to remember everything. But I could do that, but it's just kind of not my style. But I will if I have to. But yeah, one thing I wanted to talk about is this is iconic, and it's groundbreaking for the franchise because this is the first time he dons the hockey mask. It's Friday the 13th, part 3. And it's the first time we get this big, strong, powerful looking Jason. So that's another thing too that people have to keep in mind when comparing these movies to one another. First time we get the hockey mask. First time that Jason is this big hulking type Jason. And then this is Richard Brooker, one of the best Jasons of all time. And if you haven't seen this movie, I would recommend it. I think it's a very, very fun, interesting horror movie. If you like horror movies, check it out. This has been the Late Night Review. like and subscribe, please, and share this video so other people can see it. And so long for now, everybody, and good night.